Welcome everybody. This is week 3. I'm very excited for custody wallets and exchanges. Gabby will be the moderator today again, and then we've got Kristen and Erica who will be hosting the session from an expertise perspective. We will do something a little bit interesting this time around, which means we'll have a little recap quiz. I'll let Gabby ask the questions and then everybody can throw out their answers. But just upfront, any questions, thoughts on the last week or anything practical that you'd like to throw in the ring, then I'm always happy to answer. And otherwise, don't be shy to pop your questions into the chat as well. So thanks so much for everybody to be here today. And I'll pass it over to Miss Gabby.
Thank you. So kind of to just sort of get the ball rolling, as Isla mentioned, this week we wanted to do something a little bit interactive to kind of kick things off. So today we're going to start with our first question. What is self-custody versus third-party custody? So, kind of we're going to just play it for honor. So if you have a chance, go ahead, pop your answer into the chat function, and we'll kind of take it from there. So I'll go ahead and just share with you. So when you hold the keys to your assets versus when someone else holds the keys to your assets, self-custody versus third-party custody. Let's talk a little bit about MetaMask. So this week we covered a number of different issues, custody wallets and exchanges. So let's talk a little bit about how a browser like MetaMask works. If somebody wants to kind of maybe take the lead in that, that might be sort of a good starting point. Oh, let's go to Daniel Vallejos and have him talk a little bit about his experience with MetaMask.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Yeah, MetaMask, I use it as a Chrome extension. It's like what we looked at during the course, a digital wallet that allows you to have your public key that's connected to your private key. Obviously, you want to make sure you don't give your private key out because that's kind of what really keeps everything safe in your wallet. And then you have your public key where you can go and maybe if Gabby's feeling good, she'll send me one whole BTC and it'll go to my wallet. Or if I'm feeling generous, I can send her one as well. But we can move digital assets and hold them in the self-custody with our MetaMask.
Thank you. And the next question is, what is a DEX versus a SEX? So if we were looking at digital exchanges versus centralized exchanges. All right, I'm just going to start calling on people because we're just going to make it sassy. Let's go to Tony Pettipies.
Centralized implies a Coinbase type exchange, and DEX is more on the DeFi space.
Great. And then why don't we just do a really quick round robin? What was your biggest takeaway from this week's session? So we'll start with the first name that comes up. Tony, that's yours.
Just the what really strikes me about the course is Adam and his presentation and the way he presents the data. It really just works very well for me. So regardless of what the topic is, he just delves right into it and makes it accessible in a nice way that's hard to achieve. He's not lecturing. You feel like he's bringing you in, which is great.
Excellent. Danny, your turn.
So I use Coinbase and also some digital wallets. What I don't use are what was explained as platforms, where you can get digital assets, but you can't like necessarily take them off. I thought that was interesting and didn't know about that.
Excellent. BD. Moving on, Crypto Dad.
Yeah, it just shored up everything that I've done for 5 years. Really, right now my CFI, my CFI portfolio is pretty much gone. This was Celsius, but then my DeFi portfolio, everything's still on chain and untouched. So just going through that with that lens was to shore things up for me was good.
All right, excellent. Chantel, your turn.
I don't know. It was kind of a change of pace from the previous 2 weeks. I feel like kind of caught me a bit off guard. I mean, I've worked on exchanges, and I'm a consultant, so I've worked on custody platforms, so it all ring true. But definitely a lot more from like the investment perspective. So it was kind of interesting to see the like how do you play the game kind of approach.
Okay. Let's go to Ray. Okay, we'll skip Ray and go to Jerry. Oh,
Gabby,
no.
sorry, I'm driving. So
Oh, no worries. No, please drive. Don't do that. Okay. Jerry, let's go to you really quick and then we'll get started. Oh, I think he got dropped. Okay, so why don't we get started? I'm just gonna go ahead. I'd like to ask our presenters today to introduce themselves. I'll get started. My name is Gabriella Kuz. I think most of us are familiar with me from the last 2 weeks, the CEO of the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association. This is our third week of this, focusing on custody, wallets, and exchanges. Today, we have two amazing speakers, Kristen Boggiano and Erica Harford. So if we could start off, Kristen, if you could just give a brief introduction to yourself and your firm.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Kristen Boggiano. I'm the founder and president of Crosstower. Crosstower is an exchange, and it has other ancillary services connected to financial products. We're building in US, Bermuda, and in India. My background is in finance, traditional finance, where I worked on a trading floor. I also have a legal degree, so I've built a lot of structured products. I also have a regulatory background, and I represented SIFMA AMG, which is a big trade organization in the creation of Dodd-Frank. So with my product background, my trading background, and my regulatory background, it fit very nicely into the digital asset space, and I've been active for 11 years in digital assets. I also started DARLA, the Digital Asset Regulatory Legal Alliance, which is a think tank in digital assets, in addition to Crosstower.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm going to pass it over to Erica. If you could just give your brief snapshot of your background and insight to your firm.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Harford, and I'm Associate General Counsel at Anchorage Digital. Anchorage Digital is a digital asset platform for institutions. It's institution focused, and it provides services and infrastructure for institutions that need to securely custody, trade, lend, borrow assets, and participate in blockchain initiatives. In January of 2021, Anchorage Digital was also the first company to be granted a federal banking charter in the United States. So it is regulated on the same footing as other national banks. Personally at Anchorage, I focus primarily on the custody and trading operations for the business, the legal work, and I previously served as Deputy General Counsel at StoneX, which is a diversified financial services company focused on the commodity space, and also taught at the University of Chicago Law School entrepreneurship with a focus on navigating sort of newly regulated or changing regulatory landscapes for small businesses and startups. Just briefly, I'll say I came to this space personally. I like to say sort of I grew up on a dairy farm, and it's sort of the quintessential commodities business. It's where our commodities markets kind of grew out of. And as my legal career developed, focusing on commodities and securities law, I became very interested in the overlaps and between traditional commodity space and the digital asset space, and what are the similarities, what are the difference, and what are the potential sort of new uses for this asset class.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So why don't we go ahead and get into our first question. One of the things that I wanted to kind of chat a little bit about are what you all see as some of the key technical implementation challenges or opportunities that exist right now. If you could share just a little bit of insight, both from, your experience over at Anchorage, and Kristen, your experience over at Crosstower, I think that might give, kind of a good base of conversation for today's session. So I'll start with Erica, and if you could just kind of give your reflection on that question.
Yeah, well, I'll touch on some things that I mentioned in my intro. I think that the biggest challenges in this space have traditionally been technological and regulatory. And so these obstacles, there's been a lot of progress made on both of these challenges. There's increasing regulatory clarity around that will make it easier for institutional investor adoption. And the technological infrastructure also continues to mature. And so I think these two pieces have been ongoing challenges for the industry. If I take that to the present in terms of current challenges, I think about one for Anchorage, it's scaling fast enough to meet institutional demand. And two, allowing traditional financial institutions to interact with crypto and digital assets in a way that is familiar, that is sort of understandable and translates to how they have their business operations already set up.
Excellent. And I'll pass it over to Kristen. Kristen, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
Is the question the hurdles, or sort of, the hurdles that we see in this industry?
Yeah.
I have so much to say about this that I don't know even where to start. If you don't have a background in traditional finance, let me just give you a framework where you operate in traditional finance, and then juxtapose that with crypto. So in traditional finance, you've had, the 33 and the 34 Act that has provided structure. And then, of course, so generally speaking, an exchange is a matching engine, right? And it matches your orders. What we've had and developed in traditional finance is that you've had a clearinghouse where the risk is extended through FCMs, through entities that take that risk and they backstop that risk. And then you have retail customers sort of through broker dealers or through other entities. And I think Tony is an expert in this area. So if he has anything to say, to chime in. But in traditional finance, you have these different layers. You also have broker dealers that are governed in a different way. In crypto, just take all of that and just put it out the window, right? There's like no clarity. So you also in traditional finance have banks. Everyone knows about bank, right? So all of that gets mushed together in crypto, where you don't know, is it a broker dealer? Is it a bank? Is it a clearinghouse? Is it an exchange? Is it a hedge fund? I mean, you literally look at what's happening with these entities that are out there right now. You have, for example, Voyager or Celsius or BlockFi. All of these entities acted like a bank. They seem to take deposits, rehypothecate them. They acted like a broker dealer, taking whether they're securities or commodities, we don't know. They kind of acted like an exchange where there's not really a matching engine, but you could buy and sell in the marketplace. And so without that clarity, and that lack of clarity has created a lot of issues in this industry, where people who are trying to follow rules, trying to figure out what to do, don't really have the regulatory guidance like Crosstower. We tried to be very conservative, for example, and not list what are called securities on our exchange, because if we list securities, we have to register the National Securities Exchange. So we were very conservative. Coinbase, on the other hand, has taken a different approach listed 100 because they have a different definition of security. So without that clarity, we've gotten into a bit of trouble here, where there were no rules, and entities, for example, I'm just, taking what I've read in the marketplace, where people took in deposits from retail, represented that they were safe, and then they went and acted like they were proprietary and just invested them. And we've seen some bankruptcies as a result of that. So it would be very nice, and I think, Gabby, you do an excellent job in DC of really formulating how should we, what is the right regulatory approach for this industry? Because I think globally, everyone realizes this is the future of finance in many ways, and in supply chain, and in healthcare, and because of the novelty of blockchain technology. But we're really just at the very beginning of having that dialogue. And we've got Tony. I mean, I really ought to ask you to chime in here, given your expertise.
Honestly, it's just so different. I'll make the analogy that's like, you can go to any country, hire a car, they all look the same. You get on the road, you figure out which side of the road you're driving on, and you can do it. It's like landing on a different planet, and there's different rules, and there's no roads, and the car is totally different. So I think the big thing is the lack of procedures and processes that people have in traditional finance. I mean, everything is documented. Everything from the time a market opens to the time it closes is well structured. And a lot of that is missing in crypto, particularly in DeFi. And it's, I hate to use the Wild West, but it still is a bit of the Wild West. So we need to bring it in and have better regulations. And Gabby should probably speak a little bit as to what's missing there, because there's a huge opportunity, and it's really good for consumer protection, which is what we're all trying to foster, and liquidity in the market.
Yeah. And I think, just to kind of add in, every jurisdiction all over the world, all at the same time, is trying to grapple with the question of how and in what way you're going to develop your legal and regulatory structure for this space. And so, whereas normally you would have certain like global good practices that you could point to, right now you're kind of, trying to work this out for yourself. And so, for the most part, most countries took, I would say, like a first approach of trying to shoehorn this into existing legislation. I think that we've seen up until about a year ago, when there was the realization that this was uniquely something different that would require, its own legislation. And so now you're seeing things in the US, like the Digital Commodities Exchange Act coming forward, the recent bill by Senators Gillibrand and Lummis to try to carve out a taxonomy and to cover a number of different issue areas. And then I think finally even work on an SRO, or self-regulation. Globally, we've just seen in the past week some of the clarification in the European Union around the MiCA legislation at the European Union level, which hopefully will provide some level of clarity. Now, some people are pro, others are feeling that it went far too into detail into defining out especially some of the technological aspects of this. But I think there's still so much that needs to be, developed out here still. And so that's where I think, happy to kind of add my kind of perspective on this, which is that, at this point, it's still very much moving, but that lack of legal and regulatory clarity, that's really a piece that we need to, I think, work on in order to ensure that people who are building in this space feel comfortable and confident in moving forward. So I'll just kind of stop there.
Gabby, could I jump in just quickly?
Yeah, go for it.
Add on that, speaking specifically about the custody space, one of the effects of having a federal bank charter is that it's brought increased regulatory clarity to us and to our clients that, from our perspective, from Anchorage's perspective, instead of having to navigate sort of a 50-state network of regulatory framework, we sort of shift to a more sort of concentrated federal regulator and operate under that framework, which, has the effect of, bringing clarity, and with that clarity, you can expand sort of operationally because there's more sort of security of how you're building on that. It also has the effect of being familiar for, institutions, for people who want to enter into this space. And so on the custody side, it has these advantages. It also brings sort of clarity around sort of the treatment of the assets. Are the assets going to be treated as assets of the business, or are they treated as the customer's assets from a legal framework? And so that's very important to have more people come into the space. In the, stepping out of the custody space then and into the, the trading in other spaces, there's a lot less of that clarity, as Kristen mentioned. And I think it does lead to inhibiting growth and activity in that space.
And I'll also say it unfortunately, it facilitates fraud as well when there's not clarity and there's no regulation. I was surprised at how much fraud there's been. I mean, misrepresenting what you have. And in traditional finance, we saw clarity around, when there was somebody named Bernie Madoff who created one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history. And as a reaction to Bernie Madoff, there's clear guidance that a third party audit is important and critical, and the concept of custody and who has custody, who controls assets that go into an account. And I suspect that given what's happening with 3AC or 3 Hours Capital and Voyager and Celsius and BlockFi, we're going to see some reaction by regulators internationally and here domestically that are going to restate with those principles that we really need to have clarity on who has custody, what happens in a bankruptcy, and where's the third party audit, like who's watching the hen house? Is it the fox, or do we have some other objective party, which are important principles? I don't know how they're going to manifest themselves, but I think they certainly are now, unfortunately, because the industry, I think, hasn't been responsible. There hasn't been a self-regulatory organization, or there hasn't been clarity. We've had unfortunate fraud, which I think will, as it turns out, will unfortunately hurt retail and consumers and other players, obviously. It's going to, unfortunately, when there is crisis, there tends to be reactions from regulator, and that can be overdone. So let's hope that when we do see regulation and there's clarity, it's constructed in a way that will continue to see innovation. The problem with consumers in retail, with places like BlockFi, Voyager, Celsius, etc., is that there's no clarity for them. They think it's a bank. They have confidence in the U.S. financial system because the U.S. financial system has been developed to protect them in lots of ways. And unfortunately, those same practices did not develop in crypto. And so there was a trust in these entities that I think we failed as an industry to protect. But I think places like the global DCA are the intent is to help create those boundaries.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think we've had a really good conversation on some of this. I wanted to kind of move us to some of the next pieces that we're talking about. And this is just about like some of the mainstreaming that we're seeing. So we've talked about some of the need for policy approaches, clarity from legal and regulatory, beginning to foment sort of industry stewardship in a way that builds, or perhaps at this point helps to rebuild trust in the space. But what do we see as some of the technological innovations that we believe, help to perhaps enhance trust and understanding in the system? I have my own thoughts on it, but I'd like to hear from your side, especially when we talk about mainstreaming and really helping to bring in like average, both retail as well as perhaps even traditional financial sector players into the space. What is it that you're seeing from a technological evolutionary side? Erica, we'll throw it to you first.
Sure. So from a technological side, I think there's been a variety of custody type offerings in this space, and as this has evolved, you see sort of developments. So you have the concept of a hot wallet and a cold wallet, and how do you, one sort of focuses on immediate accessibility, the hot wallet. The cold wallet focuses more on security through physical security measures, and keeping the assets offline using sort of physical protective measures. One of the things that we see in custody is the development of hardware security technology that is protective in the way that we think of traditional cold storage protections of being offline, but accessible, much more accessible in terms of the use of the digital assets in the way that we associate with an online hot storage type wallet. So that's, I think, in the custody space, one of the things that I see, and that's a framework that Anchorage has worked with for its custody solution to offer to institutions.
And Kristen, is there anything that you want to add to that, or any thoughts that you have from your side? And then I'll go too, because I have some ideas, but go ahead.
No, I want you to go ahead, Gabby, because you're so excited to talk about this.
I really am. So I want to talk a little bit about, I like how I'm like, go ahead, I'm moderating. And then I'm like, but also I have a lot to say on this. No, I'm kidding. My thing is just that I've been really amazed by this industry from the level of evolution, not only of the underlying technology, but of the ability of reg tech or regulation technology to keep pace with a lot of what we're seeing. And so that's something that I think is so unique, but also serves this really amazing sort of industry-led, private sector-led solution to filling some of the gaps, at least that we see at this point from a regulatory perspective. So looking at some of the firms like Aventus or CipherTrace or Blockchain Intelligence Group, Chrysalis DAE, like some of the work that they're doing in these spaces to really provide insight into blockchain analytics to support sort of AML KYC activities, and to, like I said, fill this gap. And it's almost in real time that they themselves have been moving into developing and designing the space. And as someone who watches and has watched an industry like evolve and develop, like the financial reporting and now non-financial reporting industry, to me, I think there's a lot of parallels between what you're seeing in ESG and sustainability reporting and the filling of the gap by private sector actors in order to meet the needs that we see both of government and marketplace. So to me, like one of the coolest technological innovations that's really working, so policy to the side, what is it that we can actively do from an action standpoint to try to move things forward? Well, creating some of these technologies that both enable regulators, law enforcement, and others to act more effectively in this space is one of those. So that's kind of the thing that I think is actually really unique and amazing about this.
Yeah, I think for me, the automation, smart contract automation, and the permanency of blockchain technology, it's like you said, Gabby, there's the ability to track things in a way and make things more transparent that's never been around before. This is completely new. That brings into question, for me, the lack of privacy. And there are lots of projects that are, ongoing right now that I've looked at, where having a digital identity that you have the ability to show what you want in that digital identity, and you can become KYC'd or prove your credit rating or your validity in some way without having that information available to the world. I guess what I see with technology and the ability of the data that's available, it's kind of almost, it's a little worrisome when you know that you can track who has what wallet and how much is in that wallet. And then if you can back out whose identity is attached to that wallet, you'll have much more information than you would in a traditional financial world. So that's really exciting, and also a little terrifying. We have to fill the, we have to figure that question out.
Yeah, and I think as we get that transparency, it is this sort of exciting opportunity where we have had sort of these intermediary entities in the past that sort of serve that trust or verification function. And now that information is accessible, it's available, but it raises the privacy considerations as well. So as we try to map sort of existing institutions or existing regulatory frameworks onto this type of asset, oftentimes I come back to sort of not, is this like this other thing that already existed, but what is the purpose? Like, what is it doing? What is it solving? And then how does that compare to, this other thing that's already existing? And I think with blockchain technology, the availability of information, the accessibility of information is very different in nature from things that have preceded it.
I like to point to what happened on January 6th with the Capitol, on the Capitol. There was a person in France that transferred Bitcoin to somebody, so one of the people that was challenging the Capitol, and I think it was like a matter of days before, I think it was Chainalysis traced it back to the wallet, and then the Wall Street Journal was able to find the person that actually funded the wallet. And that was so fast, whereas that would not happen. I mean, think about it. If you had to subpoena a bank to turn over records, to figure out whose account it was, that would take potentially years to get that. So the speed at which things can be found out and scrutinized is just incredible. And that's really exciting as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to just ask, one last question. It seems, I don't know if you can see in the chat box, but Tony has a question for Kristen that I'd like to put forward, which is if you could talk a little bit about the role of market makers, especially as affiliated with exchanges, and what's good or bad about that. And what does Crosstower do in this area specifically?
So Tony, you're probably better positioned to speak on this, but very quickly, I mean, you don't want to have a conflict of interest where you're handling customer funds. So if I have clarity as to what the order flow is, because I'm on an exchange, I could potentially manipulate that market by front running my customer, just having data about what's happening in the market and providing liquidity can be at odds. So, I think, I don't know, I think there was something in the early 2000s where they actually prohibited, and Tony, you're better to speak at this because I don't remember that rule when it went into play. I just remember reading about it, but they divided that. That doesn't exist in crypto. People can make markets on their own exchanges, and they do, which again talks about why is that not good, because it can actually be to the detriment of the people on the exchanges. Exchanges operate in very weird ways here. Like if someone loses money, there are exchanges that say, well, I can just take money from people that have made money and I'll just give it to the people that are losing money. And that's just Like that just blows my mind, but the rules are very different in crypto.
So the reason I posed the question to you is I know you guys are doing the right thing and a lot of exchanges are not. So that's key.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we try very hard to do things the right way.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Isla with that. Thank you both to our speakers. So let's go through and we'll just get started. I wanted to go and just speak a little bit to, some of the group discussion and, what we found, useful or different during some of our breakout sessions. So, I might start with Crypto Dad. Jamal, if you want to just share a little bit about, our group and, what some of our subjects were, that would be very helpful.
Sure. Well, my baker in my breakout group, Chantel and Erica and you were there, and talking about the need for regulation. And I was in the middle of a sentence when the room came back, and I said, I've been interviewing people all year around the world about different regulatory topics. At a high level, I know regulation is important, but when I got out of the conversation was that there are different aspects of regulation within that regulation umbrella that need to be discussed, and everything right now is merged and combined, and everything needs to be picked out at an individual level and dealt with separately. I think that would have helped a lot of people with the Celsius and Voyager and other cases understand if they're giving money away, if they have it in exchange, or where they actually have it. If you have those different elements addressed, and I think that's somewhere we need to work on in the next few years.
Excellent. And I'll throw it over to the other room. Let's go ahead and pick someone from the other side or a volunteer if there is one. I know Ray's driving, so I really don't want to have him have an accident. Maybe Daniel, go ahead.
Thanks. So it was room 3. First, it was nice talking to everybody, like getting to know everyone. So we had a good conversation, kind of just going around. First of all, doing introductions, and then we talked a little bit about, well, if for example the DCA was fully established, everything you wanted to do, what would maybe the action be to like a Celsius right now or Three Arrows Capital? And we talked about how, well, first of all, it's even before that you would have like code of conduct, so you would have processes already in place, so something like this potentially wouldn't happen. And so I thought that was an interesting conversation, and thanks to the group.
Okay, excellent. So I wanted to just kind of take a minute to wrap up. Also with Tony, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of share your perspectives. Again, one of the nice things is that we have sort of a blend at times of a TradFi, DeFi perspective, and also just a general digital assets, traditional financial sector perspective. What are some of, especially for this session, I think it would be really helpful to get some of your takeaways for the group and to get your kind of closing thoughts or, insights on this subject.
Yeah, I actually don't have a lot to say in that area, but I would like to elucidate on what Danny said. What's the most important thing the GDCA can be doing? And it's what we're doing right now. And as I said, we have a code of conduct, and it's, fairly loose code of conduct. We're tightening that up. And I think by the September timeframe, we have committed to documenting what the procedures would look like within an SRO, day-to-day type of, from the time you wake up in the morning till the time you go to sleep at night and the markets are open, the way trading firms do. They document every single process for every participant in the industry, and that is key. And again, couple that with some of the work you're doing in DC, educating the legislators and making sure they're towing the line as opposed to writing laws willy-nilly. I think that's huge for us and huge for the industry.
I wanted to just open it up to see if there's any other questions. So we'll give a minute, or any other comments that people would like to make. Okay, and then I'll turn it over to Isla to go ahead and to kind of give her, overview, her perspectives, and then to go into some of the organizational, administrative, and logistics. So Isla?
Sure, happy to. I think one of the areas that we didn't really dig into quite yet, that I find really interesting, is this thinking around custody and how that's going to be managed moving forward. There's been this really big trend of like, not your keys, not your coins. And it's kind of almost a esoteric thought that everybody should own their own coins and be in charge of their own crypto. From a retail perspective, not sure if that's actually a realistic ask. But if does anybody have any thoughts on that subject matter? Would you personally be comfortable pulling everything you have out of your Coinbase and putting it into your own little wallet and just have it sit there? Do you have a good space?
I don't think I don't think that's a good idea. I can't remember my password to my daughter's camp. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen.
You're not going to get her back. She's gone forever. Not your password, not your daughter. You're away.
So I just think that, there's a already established wealth management platform. I think the statistics show that people that are 35 or younger actually prefer to manage their own assets. But as a general theme, I think I'm not a financial expert. I don't look at stocks every day. I don't make these decisions. And I think I hire someone to help me with that journey long-term. And I think that makes sense. So I really don't advocate people rely only on themselves for their financial wherewithal for their life.
Yeah, I think if you've been in this industry for a while, we all know people who have lost zip drives and other things. So that strikes me more as sort of where we're coming from as to where we're going, where we need to have networked, integrated, systems so that the assets can move more freely and move more efficiently. And so I don't see that being a direction. I will say though that it builds on this concept of what is ownership and control, and I think that's an important conversation to have.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's true for thinking of a Coinbase taking care of your assets, and then also on the other hand, somebody yield farming on your behalf or whatever that might be. What is the level of transparency that would increase some comfort and trust and reestablish that trust again, versus swinging all the way to the other end, being like, I'm going to do everything myself and spend 20% of my day just managing my assets. So it's not an uncomplicated process. And I think everybody who's set up a MetaMask account knows that, after a few times, you're like, okay, I really wish I didn't have to do this myself. So definitely.
Yes, I was going to say, I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't go into crypto with the MetaMask wallet. It's so complicated. I mean, even, we do a lot of NFT work now, and people who won't do crypto are interested in potentially doing NFTs, but I have to explain to them, you have to buy ETH, and then you have to, and they're like, whoa. And then I literally went to try to sell how to do this to people, and they just couldn't figure it out, and they just were so frustrated. So
they want to they want to be able to make a transaction, but there's so much more complexity around that transaction. We actually ended up creating an NFT and then transferring it to people and forcing them to create a wallet to transfer to, and then being able to find it later, because some transactions are not visible on the chain. We had to send them links of Etherscan, and it's like, by the end of it, they're like, is it really there? Is it not? I'm like, I can't tell you. This is what we got for you. You find it yourself, and that's not a good customer experience that kind of builds trust in this industry. So I just wanted to make that point, that there's a very fascinating juxtaposition happening here from like the custody perspective and the level of ownership that people want to take on about their finances. It's not, oh, that's a dog. No worries at all. So that kind of brings us to the end of this week, actually. And we would love for you all to use, as you can go through the content for the coming week, definitely use the Telegram channel to ask questions. Kristen and Erica, if you feel at all inclined to hop in there and be available for questions, that would be phenomenal. I will ping the Telegram link to you all in the email just after this. But otherwise, is there anything else that I can do to help you all when it comes to getting access to the content, viewing the content, interacting with it, etc.? And then please do let me know. You should get access to next week's content in all about 20, 30 minutes or so. So you will have that available to you in case you want to just binge on it for the weekend.
So just a word on the my keys and my wallet.
Yeah.
3 years ago or so, Jamie Dimon said, if I find any of my traders trading Bitcoin, they're fired. And people were trading Bitcoin, and people at all the big banks trade Bitcoin, but they've got it in their own individual wallet, and that's fine, and that's where they want it. So if it's in your own individual wallet or at Coinbase, that's great. But then if JP Morgan or somebody else wants to trade crypto, it's not going to be an individual trader's wallet. So the needs vary hugely depending on the use case. And that's why Fireblocks and Fidelity and all those people exist.
Yeah, absolutely. From so Diffuse, we run hedge funds, and we have our fund admin asked us for a list of all of our wallets entirely. I think we have 30 wallets for various different functions, and they're all kind of company managed. We actually ended up, because Fireblocks was not able to service us just because of the DeFi trades we do, we ended up using what's called Trustology, and that is a self-custody solution, because literally there was no custody solution that's fast enough to onboard all the new coins that we use. So that's just these nuances. Yeah, it's fascinating. We've actually reallocated a budget to start building our own, because even Trustology is scarily unreliable sometimes. We have been locked out of our own trading capabilities because we have to whitelist everything to be safe. Trustology went down, and it was middle of the night in London time, which is where they're located. So we were not able to do our rebalance time at the end of the month and strike our NAV. So these are real problems, because it's one solution in the whole market that allows us to do this. Is crazy. Yeah, we've onboarded with all others and offboarded again because they weren't able to do it. So yeah, this is the state of the situation. Yeah, please come solve it for us. Anybody who feels inspired.
So great new invention idea from Diffuse. Anybody want to step into that space? But I would also just like to second that, please feel free to reach out via the Telegram. If you have any questions, we're happy to support you. And we look forward to, engaging with you over the course of the next few weeks. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Thank you.